everybody, and welcome back to the channel today. So, today what I thought I'd speak about was at the weekend, my son got given this leaflet. Okay, you've probably seen them up and down the country because every single leaflet is exactly the same apart from the other side where I talk about your local candidates, okay, for the local elections. Now, in this, the bit that I was interested in was the fifth bit. Sorry about not being able to see it that great but it says it says Reform UK will fix broken Britain. That's what they're saying. But the fifth one is the one that I was interested because I didn't understand it. And it says put the British people first. And I've said to a few people, it depends what you call is British. Okay. Are you talking about people that were born in this country? Are you talking about people whose ancestry goes back to, I think it's the Iron Age, okay, of when the country of Britain, and it wasn't even called Britain then, I can't actually remember the actual term, got created. Okay, what are you actually talking about? Because Reform UK, they don't actually tell you anything in this leaflet what they're actually on about. Okay, and when you actually look up the term Britain, what is Britain? Okay, because Britain is just basically England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, and the overseas territories that we still have control of. Okay, that's Britain. So do you mean, or do Reform UK mean, we're going to put every person that comes under that category first? Right. So I thought I'd take a look at their policies to see if I can actually work out what they actually mean. Okay, and even when you look at their policies, it doesn't make a lot of sense because there's no policy there that says anything about putting British people first at the end of the day. But if you look at the policies, okay, you could maybe make a case for several things. So the question is, are they right to put British people first? And to make that for their pitch for the next general election and the local elections. And I would say yes. And the reason I say that is if you take, for instance, I live in a seaside town. Okay, not massive population. You know, population of where I live is actually quite small. Let's actually have a look. What is the population of Leon-Solent? Because it probably isn't very big. Yeah, it's not. It's 23,000. That is the population of last time it got checked for Leon-Solent. And that's where I live. I live in a seaside town, so it's very small. No issues with migration or immigration, you know, that type of stuff. Mainly seen as a slightly older person's place to live. Is getting younger, but that is where I live. You know, so let's get on track. You know, so the first thing that obviously he's been talking about is stopping the Boris wave. Okay, because at the end of the day, far too many people came in that period, which is what 21 to 2024 at the end of the day. You know, so that you could put in there. If you can stop that because of the indefinite leave to remain, okay, a lot of people are applying for it. You know, I've watched on Facebook groups on my Facebook. Okay, I actually started watching this, and I'll actually read this one out if I can actually find it a minute. Here we go. All right, you're not gonna be able to see it. So what it says on it, so I'll actually give you the group's name. You know, what the things you find on this group is unbelievable. And you've got lawyers giving people advice. So the group is called UK Visas and immigration, indefinite leave to remain. Okay, and there was one. This was yesterday. Okay, and he goes on to say any illegal entry by lorry from France got citizenship approved or rejected recently. So that people are trying to get advice on how to get to be able to remain in the UK. Now, so this is obviously somebody who's come in illegally, come in by lorry, so probably coming via Dover, possibly via Portsmouth, which isn't far from me. Okay, but most likely via Dover at the end of the day, and trying to get advice on how to beat the system. You know, and people are getting away with doing this on Facebook. It's absolutely unbelievable. If you want to have a little spy mission, go and look at what people put in there. You know, there was another one, I think it was yesterday, it might have been the day before, where somebody was asking for advice on how to keep his ex-wife in the country, okay, so he can get indefinite leave to remain, okay, even though that they're divorced. And the grounds that they have their visa on is in breach now. You know, so it's absolutely unbelievable, the stuff that you get on there. So yeah, if you want to see what people are doing, go and have a look at that group. Okay, it's not hard to get on there at the end of the day. Okay, so the next thing that you could arguably so there's the stop the boats. Can I see Reform UK stopping the boats? Not really. Secure and defend our borders falls into the same thing at the end of the day. Okay, and deport illegal migrants. All three, realistically, should be in the same policy at the end of the day. You don't need three separate policies. And to be honest, it doesn't really tell you a lot. Okay, so stop the boats. It actually says illegal immigration is out of control because politicians choose not to enforce the law and let foreign courts rob British citizens of a border. Can't disagree with that too much. A reformed government will stop the boats by immediately leaving the ECHR. You're not going to immediately leave the ECHR, you know that. Restoring full control of our borders, intercepting and detaining all illegal arrivals and deporting them. The fundamental thing is, if we leave the ECHR, what they don't tell people is a lot of the laws which are within the European Convention of Human Rights are in British law. So what you've got to do is leave the ECHR, and then you've got to change a load of laws that Tony Blair brought in the late 90s, early 2000s, okay, but are integrated in UK law, which give people protections at the end of the day. You know, so you might want to tweak that a little bit to tell the entire truth. There will be no loopholes, no delays, and no endless appeals. Well, sorry, there will be loopholes because of UK law. We will also end Britain being treated as a global welfare system. No more free housing, no more benefits, no more taxpayer-funded incentives for illegal migration, and an end to NGOs facilitating illegal migration. Detention and deportation will be the only outcome. Britain is a welcoming country, but it must be a country with borders, laws, and consequences. Now, the reality is, he is correct there. I don't believe that he'll be able to get it done straight away. Don't believe it for a single second. Okay, but he is right, because one of the fundamental things that I found out since we started the Borderlines Global channel, and a lot of other left-wing podcasters and YouTubers and all of that, and right-wing, and they all tell you the same thing. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to find out how much better off you're going to be by coming to the UK, okay, than if you're going to stay, for instance, in Syria, or Afghanistan, or Iraq, or any of these types of countries, So I understand why they do it. I do understand. And that's where the fundamental problem is. There's a financial benefit for them coming, even if they're going to only be here for 9 months. I remember watching one particular video. This guy came from America, and he's living on the streets. He was in the hotels and everything for a bit. But he refuses to go back to America. Absolutely unbelievable. Okay, so deport illegal migrants. Okay, let's see what it says here. We've announced a clear and uncompromising plan to remove all illegal migrants from the UK, operating restoring justice. Reform UK will implement a 5-year emergency programme to identify, detain and deport illegal migrants in the UK. We will leave the European Convention on Human Rights, repeal the Human Rights Act, and pass the Illegal Migration Mass Deportation Bill. Okay, now that's what the Human Rights Act is what Tony Blair brought in, which is where they have the fundamental problem. That is what is ingrained in UK law, which has come from the European Convention of Human Rights. So it's a lot of the stuff that are involved within the European, within the ECHR, which is integrated into UK law. And that's why a lot of lawyers are able to, some people say that they're doing it on ECHR grounds. Some will say that they're doing it based on European law. They're both integrated into UK law at the end of the day. So to be able to get rid of them and deport them, okay, you need to repeal the Human Rights Act, because that's the big problem. Now, obviously it goes on to say, pass the Illegal Migration or Mass Deportation Bill to ensure that anyone who enters the country illegally will be ineligible for asylum. We will establish a UK deportation command and use all the available levers of the state to identify illegal migrants and deport them, including rapidly building secure immigration removal centres with capacity of up to 24,000. Now, my problem with this, and I've spoken about this on a few occasions, is there's no legal way to apply for asylum to the UK. So even if you are legitimate, which I would probably say over 90% of them aren't, but let's say you're a legitimate asylum seeker, you've got grounds to apply for asylum to UK. There's no legal way to do it. Short of the Ukraine issue, which is slightly different, you cannot apply for asylum without having to break the law. You have to break the law. And I've had this confirmed by politicians. I've spoken to MPs about this. Okay, you have to do that. So I would suggest that they have to find a legal mechanism for people also to apply for asylum to the UK, whether that is in their home country, okay, or some other way. There's got to be some mechanism that they potentially got to find for people to apply for asylum to the UK legally. So we've got that. So those are the first three things for why I can say they're actually talking about putting British people first. Because if they can sort that out, they're a long way to keeping the British citizens, I say, or UK citizens, happy. Now, next one, make law-abiding citizens feel safe. Now, as a lot of coppers will say, the police force have gone extremely woke. If you take, for instance, Waitrose, one of their directors, came out the other day and basically complained that they can't. I think it was Waitrose. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Waitrose. It was one of the, no, it might have actually been Marks and Spencer's, and complaining that the police do nothing if their staff get abused, shoplifting, all that type of stuff. They don't really do anything unless it meets a minimum amount of money, which is absolutely ridiculous. So unless that all gets changed and you take a zero policy approach to criminality, it's never going to happen. You've just got to look at, and if you look at serious crime, you've just got to look at the stats when it comes to rape or sexual assault. I looked at it recently and I thought, oh my bloody goodness. I never actually realised, and it was only because I was watching a podcast, the Heretics podcast, and he had a very right-wing lady on there. I'll put it that way, and she was speaking about it and speaking about how disgraceful it is that the amount of people that how many rapes a person can commit before they're actually getting charged, or the amount of rapes and sexual assaults that don't actually go forward. And it wasn't until I actually looked into it myself and actually realised how bad it really is. Now, the conviction rates, they're over 50%, so you can't knock them for that. But the amount that go to prosecution, there is a fundamental problem. Now, there are reasons for it sometimes, and I don't dispute that, and people may not like it. But as a whole, that's something that needs to be addressed. Crime does need to be addressed. I get my inbox for Happening News, which is a newspaper that I run, is filled up every single day with serious crime. It's ridiculous. So they are correct, yet again, that something needs to be done about crime. Whether they're going to get 30,000 new coppers on the beat over a 5-year period, don't believe it for a single second. We heard that under Boris Johnson, and I don't believe that he even got anywhere near it. So that's another one. So what have we got next? So we've got make work pay. Now the fundamental problem with this, and I hate to say this, work doesn't pay. It does not pay to go to work. It pays to be on benefits. And a lot of people are going to be screaming at me for saying that. But the reality is, that is the case. I got signed off sick a couple of years ago. I'm hoping to be able to fully go back to work later on this year when I get, if the doctors and everything agree to it. But I remember going to an appointment because I was on restart. Okay, even though they couldn't really do anything with me, and they said, "Don't go back to work full time. Just go back part time. It's not worth your while. Just go back part time." And that's why work doesn't pay, because me and my wife would be worse off unless I was getting a whopping great big salary, which would be over the average salary in the UK. And the average salary is like mid 30,000s. They said to me, "You'll be worse off. Just go back part time." And that's why, I'm sorry to say it, work doesn't pay unless you're starting up your own business and you can take advantage of some of the tax loopholes, or you're earning a very good salary because you've got a good job. Whether you're like a doctor or an accountant or something, a lawyer or something like that, you need to have a decent job. Now, the last ones, actually, I'll do the last one because this is pretty basic, which is to make Britain the best place to start and run a business. Now, currently, the UK is not the best place to start a business. It's probably one of the worst because of what the Conservatives and the Labour Party have done to business. Now, as my father and uncle used to say to me, he always used to say, look after your staff. Because if you look after them in the good times, they'll look after you in the bad times. That's what they've said to me for probably the last 30 years. Okay, but the problem is, it's not as easy as it once was to run a business because it's more expensive to get employees. And that's one problem. Then obviously there's the tax system works against you. How expensive, if you've got a shop, all the rates that you've got, the energy costs, which unless reform can address all of that, it's not going to be the best place to run a business because of how profitable, just say for instance 20 years ago you could be compared to what you need to be now, how much more revenue you need to be bringing in to make it worthwhile. So the reality is, for reform to actually put Brits first is a massive challenge. And I mean a massive challenge for them. And to be honest, I don't know how they're going to do it. If they were to win the next election, I seriously don't know how they would do it. Based on all them things that they're actually talking about, and specifically the first three, which is stop the boat, secure and defend our borders, and deport illegal migrants. And you could also take a number 4, which is scrap indefinite leave to remain to avert the Boris wave. I don't understand how they're going to do it all. I think they're making promises here that they're not going to be able to achieve, which is no different to every political party, probably in history, making promises they can't back up and keep. So let us know what you think. Do you think that they can actually achieve any of this? So let us know in the comments down below. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you all again a bit later.